The announcement came at dawn, when the training grounds were still wrapped in a cold mist that clung to every metal surface. The cadets gathered in rigid lines, shivering not from the chill, but from the tension hanging in the air, because every whisper over the last week hinted that the instructors were preparing something unprecedented. Liam stood among the rows, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable, as if he had already made peace with whatever the academy planned to unleash. When the loudspeaker cracked to life, silence fell instantly, and the lead instructor strode forward with a datapad in her hand, her face stern as if she had already written off half the class. She announced the assignment with a calmness that made it even more terrifying. Each cadet was to enter Sector 9 and bring back the Vorkara beast alive for study. A wave of gasps rolled through the formation. Sector 9 was the most unforgiving zone on the entire Academy world, a stretch of volcanic ridges, razor vine thickets, and echoing caverns where visibility was often measured in breaths rather than meters. But none of that frightened the cadets as much as the mention of the Vorkara. Every species represented in the Academy knew stories of her. How she shredded armored patrols, how she outran scout vehicles, how she vanished from tracking grids as if mocking every sensor array designed to find her. She was a legend of destruction, a living shadow with scales that could deflect plasma rounds. The instructors expected panic, and they got it. Some cadets whispered desperate strategies to each other, talking about high-frequency nets or sonic lures, even though they all knew such equipment rarely worked. Others stared at the ground, already imagining their names being carved into memorial plaques. Liam, however, simply watched the instructor, absorbing every detail of her tone, her choice of words, the faint hesitations she tried to hide. He understood that she was not presenting a challenge meant to be solved through brute force or blind courage. The assignment was a test of understanding, adaptation, and intuition, traits humans had relied on long before they traveled among the stars. When the briefing concluded, the cadets were given 1 hour to prepare. The rush back to the equipment bay looked almost chaotic. Cadets grabbed tranquilizer rifles, fortified armor layers, auto-deploy traps, thermal drones, anything that felt like an extra layer of protection between themselves and the monstrous silhouette that haunted every documented encounter. The atmosphere buzzed with fear disguised as determination, as if enough gear could compensate for uncertainty. Liam walked into the bay without urgency. He moved past the rows of high-tech devices, pausing only briefly to look at the blinking consoles and sleek weapon casings. He touched nothing. Instead, he picked up a simple rope, a ration pack, and a small container of nutrient gel. His choices caught the attention of an instructor passing by, who frowned but said nothing, perhaps believing that a cadet who prepared so lightly simply did not understand the severity of the task. Liam understood it perfectly. He knew that the Vorkara was not a mindless engine of destruction, but a creature driven by instincts that made sense within her environment. The Academy's mistake, repeated over decades, was assuming she behaved like a tactical opponent who needed to be subdued through force or trickery. But beasts like her responded to patterns of calmness, scent, posture, and unspoken energy. He had grown up in a rural region on Earth, where he spent years taming horses, calming feral dogs, and learning to approach animals not through dominance, but through patience. Nothing in the Academy's database resembled a Vorkara, yet the fundamental truth remained unchanged. No creature existed without an inner logic. When the hour ended, the cadets boarded transport skiffs that would drop them at the fringes of Sector 9. As the engines hummed and the metallic doors slid shut, many cadets tried to steady their breathing. Some rehearsed plans aloud, some clutched their gear, and some simply prayed. Liam gazed out the narrow viewport at the jagged horizon ahead. He felt no thrill, no fear, only a focused curiosity. He wanted to meet her, to understand the rhythm of her territory, the sound of her steps, the silence that followed her movements. He felt as if this moment had been waiting for him long before he ever set foot in the Academy. When the skiffs landed, the instructors issued the final reminder. The task ended at sunset tomorrow. Any cadet who failed to retrieve the beast alive would fail the entire trial. The ground beneath Liam's boots was warm, almost pulsing with geological energy, and a distant howl echoed through the canyon, sending shivers through the group. That unmistakable resonance belonged to her. Some cadets flinched, others froze completely. Liam stepped forward first, breathing in the thick mineral scent of the rocks, the faint sweetness of the razor vine blossoms, and the musky trace that lingered in the wind, the scent of the Vorkara herself. She was out there, watching. She always watched. Liam tightened his grip on the rope slung over his shoulder and walked into the canyon without hesitation. The other cadets scattered in different directions, guided by their fear, selfish ambition, or untested strategies. The echoes of their footsteps faded quickly, swallowed by the labyrinth of stone. Liam moved with deliberate softness, placing each step with the awareness of someone who knew that the ground itself carried messages to every creature attuned to its vibrations. He wanted her to sense him, not as a threat, not as prey, but as a presence entering her world with respect rather than aggression. The canyon walls towered above him, painted with streaks of mineral deposits that shimmered faintly in the dim light. The air grew heavier as he walked deeper, filled with the hum of unseen insects and the distant rumble of subterranean vents. Every few minutes, a faint tremor rolled through the ground, subtle enough that a nervous cadet might mistake it for natural seismic activity. Liam knew better. The tremors had a rhythm, a cadence shaped by the gait of something massive and graceful. She was moving, circling, testing the boundaries of the intruders who had stepped into her domain. Liam stopped at a fork in the canyon. To his left, sharp rocks formed a narrow passage that would amplify sound and make him easy to detect. To his right, the walls widened into a shallow basin where the earth bore deep claw marks. He knelt beside the gouges, brushing the rough surface with his fingertips. The depth, spacing, and curvature matched the archived descriptions, confirming that this was one of her marking grounds. She used this place to communicate strength, territory, and warning. Most cadets would avoid such a location entirely. Liam chose it deliberately. He sat down on a smooth stone, unscrewed the nutrient gel container, and let a small amount drip onto the ground. The scent was mild and familiar to many predators, a universal signal of harmless food. He placed the container beside him, then rested his hands on his knees, closing his eyes. He slowed his breathing. He relaxed his shoulders. He emptied his posture of all tension. The message was simple. He was here, he was unarmed, and he was patient. Minutes passed, then more. The canyon wind shifted, carrying the unmistakable musk again. A low growl rolled across the basin, not aggressive but cautious, as if she wondered whether the human in her territory was foolish, brave, or simply unaware of her proximity. Liam opened his eyes slowly, lifting his chin just enough to acknowledge the sound without challenging it. Somewhere beyond the rocks, her massive form slinked across the shadows, silent as a drifting wraith. He felt a thrill in his chest, not fear, but a sense of meeting something ancient and magnificent. He knew she would not approach fully today. She needed time to study him, just as he needed time to understand her. The trial had begun, not with violence, but with an exchange of presence. The Academy believed the assignment was impossible, but Liam saw it differently. The impossible part was not capturing the beast. The impossible part was convincing others that force was never the answer. As he rose from the stone and walked deeper into her territory, he felt her gaze following him with sharp intelligence. This was her domain. But now she knew he was in it, not as a trespasser, but as someone who came to meet her on her terms. And that, he already sensed, changed everything. Liam walked deeper into the canyon, feeling the subtle shift in the ground beneath his boots as the terrain changed from warm volcanic stone to a looser, grainy surface that carried vibrations more easily. He knew she was somewhere close, pacing along the edges of his awareness, circling him with a patience honed by years of dominating this harsh environment. She did not reveal herself, but her presence pressed against him like the weight of the air before a storm. He welcomed it, because it told him that she had already decided he was worth observing rather than eliminating. The deeper he moved into Sector 9, the more distant the faint sounds of other cadets became, dissolving into the jagged maze of stone until only the natural rhythm of the canyon remained. A sharp metallic clatter echoed briefly from a ridge far behind him, followed by a short scream abruptly cut off. He did not turn around. He knew another cadet had attempted a net trap and discovered too late that she could tear through alloys stronger than titanium foam. He had predicted such outcomes, not out of arrogance, but from understanding that fear drove most cadets to act impulsively. She punished impulsiveness swiftly. The path ahead broadened into a plateau lined with towering basalt columns, their surfaces etched with patterns left by ancient lava flows. A warm haze shimmered above the rocks as heat vented from fissures deep below, creating a natural barrier that distorted vision. For most cadets, this haze was a tactical disadvantage. For her, it was a perfect hunting veil. Liam crouched to study the ground again, tracing the shape of her footprints. The soil contained fine charcoal dust, easily disturbed, yet her steps left impressions smoother than expected, almost delicate for such a massive creature. This confirmed his suspicion that she controlled her weight distribution consciously, a sign of intelligence uncommon among large predators. He knew this basin served as part of her observation zone, where she monitored movement across the upper ridges before deciding when and how to engage intruders. A sudden tremor pulsed through the ground, stronger than the previous ones. Liam rose slowly, turning his head toward a distant ridge where a shadow dipped in and out of the haze. The shape was unmistakable, long, fluid, dangerous. She was following him openly now, confident enough to let him sense her presence without risk. He placed a hand gently on the basalt wall beside him, grounding himself in the texture of the stone. He did not speak or call out to her. Sound meant little to her unless it conveyed threat or challenge. Instead, he adjusted his breathing again, keeping his heartbeat steady in the hope that she would interpret his calmness correctly. He continued across the plateau, and soon reached an area where the terrain fractured into broken slabs, forming narrow pockets where small animals nested. The scent of scorched minerals mingled with the musk of old kills left by her. Liam stepped over a cluster of bones half buried in dust, noting the precise puncture marks on them. Her fangs were capable of crushing exoskeletons reinforced with natural carbon plating, yet the marks showed restraint rather than brute force. Even her kills reflected intention, not chaos. He admired the paradox of her existence, a creature feared across the Academy world, yet possessed of control sharper than most cadets would ever understand. He paused when he noticed a fresh disturbance in the soil where a large boulder had been shifted recently. The drag marks suggested she had used her shoulder rather than her claws, likely pushing it aside to create a vantage point. He approached it cautiously, not because he feared her attack, but because he knew she disliked sudden disruptions to her lookout spots. The boulder overlooked a narrow ravine where several cadets had wandered earlier. Their distant cries echoed faintly from below, confirming that she had already observed them and evaluated them as non-threatening or irrelevant. She chose her interactions carefully, and Liam respected that restraint. The wind shifted again, carrying a stronger wave of her scent. It was denser this time, more concentrated, indicating that she had positioned herself somewhere upwind to test his reaction. Liam stopped walking and lowered himself to sit on a warm, flat stone. He rested his elbows loosely on his knees and tilted his head back slightly to expose more of his throat. It was a universal signal among predators, vulnerability as an offering rather than provocation. He did not expect her to approach immediately, but he knew she would understand the gesture. In the animal world, no creature submitted its throat unless it rejected hostility. Minutes stretched into a long, steady silence that filled the ravine. Liam listened to the rumble of distant vents and the faint rustle of razor vines swaying in the heated air. Then he heard it, soft at first, then distinct, a low, resonant huff followed by the scrape of claws on stone. She emerged from the haze without warning, her body gliding forward as smoothly as a shadow falling across the ground. Her scales shimmered with a muted metallic sheen, reflecting the reddish glow of the volcanic fissures. Her amber eyes locked onto him with an intensity that froze the air between them. She stood 3 meters away, her shoulders rising and falling with controlled breaths. She did not roar or bare her fangs. She simply watched. Liam did not move. He felt the weight of her evaluation, the silent questioning of whether he belonged in her world. She stepped closer, each movement deliberate. The ground shifted slightly under her weight, but she kept her posture relaxed. When she reached the edge of the stone where he sat, she studied him with a slow tilt of her head. Her pupils narrowed to slits, then widened again as she examined the rhythm of his breathing, the scent he carried, the absence of fear in his gaze. He sensed her curiosity growing, not as a prelude to attack, but as a recognition that he behaved differently from others who entered her territory with weapons raised and hearts pounding. She lowered her head, bringing her eyes level with his. Her breath washed over him, warm and tinged with the mineral-rich sense of her environment. He met her gaze without flinching, appreciating the intelligence shining through it. She pulled back slightly, not in hesitation, but in acknowledgement, as if verifying that he understood her language. Then she circled him slowly, brushing her flank against the stone while keeping him within her sight. This was no threat display. It was a ritual of assessment, one he recognized from observing wild felines on Earth. When she completed the circle, she released a soft grunt and slipped back into the haze, her massive form dissolving into the shimmering veil like a wraith returning to the void. Liam remained seated, letting the silence settle over him again. The encounter had been brief, but it confirmed everything he suspected. She feared nothing in this canyon, not the cadets, not the instructors, not the weaponry designed to subdue her. But she recognized intention, presence, and respect. She recognized that he did not come to dominate her. Liam stood up slowly, stretching his legs as he looked toward the direction she had vanished. He knew she would watch him more openly now, interpreting his path as an invitation rather than an intrusion. The challenge ahead remained immense, and the Academy's deadline pressed closer with every hour. Yet he felt no anxiety. For the first time since the trial began, he knew he had crossed the first boundary of her trust. What came next would determine whether she accepted him as a temporary visitor or something far more significant in her solitary world. Liam resumed his path through the shimmering canyon, moving with the quiet certainty of someone who no longer felt like an intruder. He sensed her behind him again, not in the same distant, testing manner as before, but with a new rhythm in her movement. She followed him more closely now, allowing him to feel the subtle pressure of her presence without masking it. Each step he took echoed softly against the basalt, and each time he paused to observe the terrain, she paused as well, hidden within the haze but unmistakably near. The connection between them remained fragile, a thread woven by patience rather than control, yet he felt it growing stronger with every measured breath. He knew that securing her trust was only part of his task. The instructors expected a captured beast, something contained and brought under Academy authority. He understood that no chain would ever hold her, nor did he intend to force her into one. If he wanted her cooperation, he needed to offer something she could interpret as mutually beneficial. He needed to build a decoy camp that signaled safety, familiarity, and non-threatening purpose. The idea formed gradually in his mind as he studied the layout of the canyon ahead, a place where he could create an environment she would approach willingly. He moved toward a natural alcove carved into one of the towering canyon walls. The space was sheltered by an overhang of black volcanic stone and ringed with razor vine growths that could be easily trimmed back to create a clearing. The rock surface behind him radiated gentle warmth from the subterranean vents, creating a perfect area for a creature accustomed to hot environments. Liam walked inside and stood still for a moment, letting the air settle around him as he envisioned how the camp should appear. It needed to be spacious enough for her massive frame, yet not so open that she would feel exposed. It needed scents that suggested nourishment without signaling aggression. It needed textures she associated with her own markings. He began by gathering long, dry branches from the outskirts of the plateau where heat seldom reached. The branches were tough but flexible, perfect for constructing a framework. He wove them together with rope he had brought, forming a loose canopy that softened the light spilling from above. Then he collected scraps of fabric and metallic fragments left behind by previous training exercises, abandoned gear from cadets who had deserted the area. He repurposed these into hanging strips that fluttered in the thermal drafts, mimicking the dangling leaves that surrounded her natural resting places. He did not intend to deceive her. He intended to speak in the language of shape, motion, and scent. As he worked, he felt her watching from the haze, her eyes following each gesture he made. She stepped closer once, just enough for her shadow to stretch across the ground near the alcove's entrance. He did not look directly at her. Instead, he continued weaving the canopy, letting her observe without forcing interaction. She lowered her head, sniffing the air for unfamiliar scents. The faint trace of nutrient gel drifted from his pack, and he wondered whether she interpreted it as a signal of peaceful coexistence. He kept his movements steady, avoiding any abrupt noise that might disrupt the fragile sense of calm between them. When the canopy was complete, he turned his attention to the ground. He used a flat metal panel to scrape away rough stones and clear a smooth circular area large enough to accommodate her body. The dust he uncovered carried a subtle mineral sweetness, something he recognized as the scent she often left near her observation ridges. He sprinkled more of the nutrient gel around the edges of the clearing, creating a faint but enticing trail that would guide her inside the alcove. He did not want to lure her like an animal into a trap. He wanted to create a space that reflected understanding, a place she could approach without fear of harm. Next, he constructed decoy signals, small stacks of stone arranged in patterns similar to the ones she carved with her claws. He studied the curvature of her marks from earlier and replicated the arrangements as closely as he could. He knew she communicated through these patterns, expressing territorial boundaries, warnings, and even moments of rest. If he placed these stones correctly, she would interpret them as an invitation, not a challenge. He took his time, adjusting each stack until he felt confident that the shapes conveyed neutrality. She moved closer again, the tremors beneath his feet stronger now. He continued working, not acknowledging her directly, allowing her the freedom to decide when the moment was right. She remained behind a rocky outcrop, her silhouette barely visible as she watched him bring the camp to life. He could almost sense her confusion. No cadet had ever built something like this before. Most ran, hid, or attacked. He built. With the clearing finished, the canopy secured, and the decoy markings placed, he sat down near the back of the alcove. He rested his hands on his knees and breathed slowly, letting the air circulate with steady warmth. The camp was not a trap. It was a message. He wanted her to understand that he was offering companionship, not dominance. He wanted her to see that he accepted her world rather than imposing his own. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet crackle of heat radiating through the stone walls. Then he heard her move again, this time stepping fully into the open. Her claws scraped against the ground in a slow, deliberate rhythm. He opened his eyes gently, without abrupt motion, and saw her standing near the entrance of the alcove. Her head was low, her gaze sharp and searching, but her posture held no threat. She studied the canopy, the stones, the cleared space, and the subtle scent of nutrient gel carried by the warm air. She took several steps inside, her massive frame dwarfing the structure he had built. Yet she did not push it aside or tear it down. Instead, she lowered her head again, sniffing the ground near the stone stacks. Liam remained still. She walked slowly around the edges of the alcove, brushing her flank lightly against the canopy. She paused near him, her amber eyes glowing softly as she examined his expression. He offered no commands, no gestures, no attempt to reach out. He allowed her to take control of the moment. After a long silence, she released a soft rumble, not a warning, but something akin to acknowledgement. It vibrated through the air with a gentle resonance he had not heard before. She circled the clearing once more, then settled onto the smooth ground he had prepared, curling her tail around herself as she rested her weight. The canopy swayed lightly above her as she adjusted her position, testing the support of the structure. Liam felt a quiet surge of satisfaction. She had accepted the space. She had accepted him. He understood that her decision to lie down here was more than mere comfort. It was an act of profound trust, one that no instructor or cadet had ever earned from her. Liam leaned back against the warm stone wall, breathing in the mingled scents of dust, heat, and her musky presence. The decoy camp had served its purpose, not as a trap, but as a bridge between two beings who existed in different worlds. In this small alcove, for the first time, he and she shared the same space not as predator and intruder, but as companions. He knew the path ahead remained uncertain. Cooperation did not guarantee obedience, and trust must be nurtured carefully. But as he listened to her steady breathing and watched her close her eyes beneath the shimmering canopy, he understood that the trial had entered a new stage, one where survival depended not on force or weapons, but on the quiet language that connected him to her, wordless yet powerful. Liam woke before dawn, roused not by sound, but by the slow shift of warm air inside the alcove as subterranean vents stirred the canyon's breath. He opened his eyes carefully, mindful not to startle her. She remained curled in the clearing he had prepared the day before, her massive torso rising and falling in deep, steady rhythms. The soft glow of pre-dawn light reflected faintly across her scales, revealing subtle patterns he had not noticed before, long streaks of iridescence that shimmered gently when she moved. He watched her for several moments, astonished by how calm she looked while resting in a place he had constructed with nothing but instinct and trust. The fragile bond between them had taken root, and now he needed to strengthen it until she accepted him not merely as a tolerated presence, but as someone she could respond to by choice. He rose slowly, stretching his muscles with deliberate quietness. She flicked her tail once, sensing movement, but did not rise. The trust she offered by remaining in a vulnerable position near him was something he refused to take lightly. He stepped out of the alcove and into the cool morning air, inhaling the mixture of mineral dust and faint floral notes that drifted through the canyon. Sunlight had not yet broken over the ridges, giving the environment a muted color, almost dreamlike. He knew this hour mattered. Many predators became curious and more receptive during the transition from night to day, and she was no exception. He walked several meters away from the alcove to find materials for the next stage of his plan. If he wanted her to follow commands and accept a saddle, he needed to deepen their connection. Somewhere in the canyon's natural rhythm lay the key. He scanned the ground for signs of her preferred resting routes, observing how the soil held impressions of her claws in distinct arcs. Each arc represented a habitual movement. Her patterns were deliberate, never chaotic. Animals with such precision responded well to consistent repetition and gentle guidance. He collected a handful of long, thin, fibrous vines from a patch of vegetation thriving near a thermal vent. The vines were flexible yet strong, and once braided, they could form a makeshift harness that would not irritate her scales. He remembered how horses on Earth needed tack made to accommodate the shape and sensitivity of their skin, and he understood that she deserved the same level of respect. As he braided the vines, he remained acutely aware of her presence behind him. She had woken and approached the alcove's entrance, though she stayed within the shadows, watching him. Her gaze followed his hands, her pupils adjusting to the soft light as she observed the weaving pattern. Her ears twitched occasionally, not in agitation, but in curiosity. She rumbled softly, the sound vibrating through the stone walls around her. He did not turn toward her immediately. Instead, he kept working, letting her examine his intent without the pressure of direct attention. When he finished the braid, he lifted it slowly and allowed it to sway in the air, letting her see that it posed no threat. She tilted her head slightly, stepping closer but maintaining enough distance to retreat if she felt uncertain. Her nostrils widened as she sniffed the air, trying to interpret the new object's purpose. Liam approached her cautiously, each step measured, every muscle relaxed. She watched him closely, the yellow glow in her eyes deepening as she evaluated his movements. He stopped when he reached the border of her comfort zone, the invisible threshold she had established during their interactions. She lowered her head, inviting him into that space with an unexpected grace. He extended the braided vine slowly, allowing her to smell it. She nudged it gently with her snout, releasing a huff of warm air. He took that as permission to continue. He reached up, brushing the top of her shoulder lightly with the vine, watching for any sign of tension. Her scales shifted under his touch, but she did not recoil. Instead, she stood taller, adjusting her posture to give him better access. He draped the harness over her shoulder, then eased it down along her flank, ensuring it did not catch on any protrusions. She flicked her tail once, a gesture he interpreted as acknowledgement rather than irritation. He tightened the harness gradually, securing the ends beneath her chest where the vines would hold firmly without pinching. She shifted her weight, testing the pressure, then released a low rumble that resonated through her body. The sound was not one of discomfort. It was something else, something closer to contentment. Liam felt a thrill of awe ripple through him. He lightly stroked her flank, tracing the edges of her scales with the back of his hand. She closed her eyes briefly, leaning into the gentle pressure. With the harness in place, he stepped back, giving her room to explore the sensation. She began to move slowly around the alcove, lifting her legs in deliberate arcs as she adjusted to the new weight. The vines swayed rhythmically with her movements. She sniffed the air near the stone stacks, then returned to Liam, nudging his arm with surprising delicacy for a creature so massive. The gesture carried unmistakable meaning. She trusted him fully now. He knew the next step required utter patience. He gathered additional vines and began working on a saddle frame, using larger branches to create a secure base. The saddle had to distribute weight evenly across her back, respecting the natural curvature of her spine. He shaped the branches carefully, bending them into a smooth arch. She watched him the entire time, standing close enough that he could feel the heat emanating from her body. Occasionally, she nudged one of the branches, as if assessing its strength or offering her own judgment. He found himself working with a sense of partnership, not dominance. When the frame was complete, he added softer layers of fabric and padding retrieved from abandoned gear. He secured the materials with additional vines, creating a stable but comfortable seat. He lifted the saddle slowly, letting her observe every motion, and approached her from the side. She did not retreat. Instead, she lowered her shoulders slightly, guiding him to the best position for securing the saddle. He placed the frame gently on her back, adjusting it until the weight settled evenly. She rolled her shoulders experimentally, testing how the saddle fit. He tightened the straps beneath her chest and confirmed that nothing pinched or restricted her movement. She took several steps forward, the saddle following her motion seamlessly. Liam walked beside her, matching her stride, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. She turned her head toward him, her amber eyes glowing with a softness he had not expected from a creature spoken of only as a monster. She released a low, vibrating purr that filled the alcove with a resonance so warm and unexpectedly gentle that it made his chest tighten with emotion. He reached up tentatively, placing his hand on the top of her head. She leaned into the touch, closing her eyes, the purr deepening. With the saddle in place, he began introducing simple commands, gestures rather than words. He raised his hand slowly, palm outward, and she paused. He lowered his hand, guiding her to move forward. She followed the motions with remarkable precision. He shifted his stance, encouraging her to turn. She adjusted her path with fluid grace. Each movement reinforced the delicate bond between them, shaping it into something tangible, something powerful. As the sun rose fully over the canyon, light poured into the alcove, illuminating her scales in brilliant gold and copper hues. She looked magnificent, an apex predator now adorned with a harness and saddle, standing proudly beside the human she had chosen to trust. Liam rested his hand on her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her body and the steady rhythm of her breath. He knew that this transformation went beyond training. It was an alliance forged not through force, but through mutual respect. The instructors had expected a captured beast. Instead, he had formed a partnership, a bond unthinkable to anyone who had ever feared her. And as she lowered her head to nudge him gently once more, he understood that the real challenge was no longer survival. It was proving to the academy that trust could achieve what fear never could. The morning sun climbed steadily over the ridges, casting long golden lines across the canyon floor as Liam prepared for the final step of the trial. The saddle rested securely on her back, the harness snug but comfortable, and the soft padding adjusted perfectly to her movements. She stood beside him with a calm steadiness that felt surreal for a creature once described as uncontrollable. Her amber eyes gleamed in the sunlight, reflecting a confidence that mirrored his own. She nudged his arm with her massive head, an unmistakable signal that she was ready to follow wherever he needed to go. He placed his hand gently on her flank, feeling her muscles shift beneath her scales, and took a moment to appreciate how far they had come. The trial was not just nearing completion, it was evolving into something far beyond what the academy had envisioned. He guided her slowly out of the alcove, allowing her time to adjust to the unfamiliar terrain beneath the saddle's weight as they moved toward the path leading out of Sector 9. She walked with fluid grace, stepping around boulders and weaving between protruding slabs of basalt as though she had done so with a rider her entire life. Liam walked beside her at first, studying her gait, ensuring the saddle caused no discomfort. She snorted softly and flicked her tail, a gentle sign of impatience, prompting him to laugh under his breath. She was ready for him to ride. He paused at a smooth incline where the sunlight illuminated her back. He ran his hand along the edge of the saddle, feeling its warmth. With a slow, respectful motion, he placed his foot into the braided loop he had fashioned as a stirrup and swung himself onto her back. She shifted her weight but did not flinch. Instead, she released a deep, resonant purr that vibrated beneath him, the sound echoing faintly across the canyon. He settled into the saddle, adjusting his balance as she straightened proudly beneath his weight. She moved forward with confidence, her stride steady and powerful as she carried him toward the academy. The path out of the canyon was long, winding between jagged cliffs and over rocky spans that had deterred countless cadets. She navigated it with an ease that made Liam feel as though he had merged with the rhythm of her movements. As they climbed a steep ridge, he could see the training ground far in the distance, a broad plateau dotted with equipment, instructors, and cadets waiting to report their failures or minor successes. None of them expected a triumphant return. He knew that the academy believed the Vorkara beast to be unapproachable, let alone rideable. The stunned silence awaiting his arrival played in his imagination, but the reality would be far greater. She paused at the top of a ridge and looked back at him. Her eyes held a depth he could not fully decipher, something ancient, intelligent, and quietly proud. He rested his hand on her neck and whispered softly, though he knew she understood tone more than speech. She continued forward, her pace steady as she descended toward familiar ground. When she stepped out of the canyon and onto the open plains leading to the training grounds, the reaction was instantaneous. Cadets scattered at the sight of her silhouette cresting the horizon, their shouts echoing across the field. Some tripped over equipment, others dropped their weapons, and many simply froze with their mouths open, unable to comprehend the image in front of them. The feared Vorkara beast walking calmly toward them with a human on her back. Instructors rushed forward, shouting orders and warnings, unsure whether to prepare defenses or evacuate the trainees. Liam raised one hand gently, signaling them to stay back, though he doubted many understood the message. She walked with regal composure, the saddle gleaming in the sunlight, her tail swaying in a pattern that unmistakably conveyed calm. The lead instructor pushed through the crowd, her expression a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a wary respect she fought to conceal. She stopped several meters away, unable to step closer. Liam guided the beast to a gentle halt, then leaned forward and stroked the top of her head affectionately. She lowered her body slightly, allowing him to slide off her back with ease. The silent field trembled not from danger but from awe. He stepped forward, placing himself between her and the instructors. He knew that many expected her to attack, and he refused to allow fear to color the moment. She remained still behind him, her breathing steady, her presence overwhelming yet peaceful. He met the lead instructor's gaze as she struggled to find words. She managed at last to speak. "Explain this." Liam gestured gently toward the beast. "She chose trust," he said. "Not submission, not captivity. Trust." The instructor looked at the saddle, the harness, the relaxed posture of the creature. It defied everything she had ever taught and everything the Academy believed about danger, strength, and survival. Liam could see the conflict in her eyes, admiration entwined with apprehension, pride wrestling with disbelief. The other instructors murmured among themselves, unsure whether to commend him or question the legitimacy of the trial's result. She took a hesitant step forward. The beast's gaze sharpened, and Liam raised his hand slightly to reassure her. The instructor saw the gesture and froze. She realized that Liam and the beast spoke through movements alone, a language she did not understand but could not deny. She lowered her voice. "You brought her back alive." "She came back willingly," he corrected gently. "That is the difference." Silence rippled across the training grounds as the meaning of his words settled over everyone present. The instructors had demanded capture. He had delivered cooperation. The feat was greater than the assignment itself. No technology, no weapon, no force had ever brought the Vorkara beast into camp alive. Yet here she stood, calm, confident, and unbound, choosing to remain by his side. The instructor's expression softened with reluctant admiration. "You have exceeded the expectations of this academy," she said quietly. "This was not capture. This was something we did not believe possible." Liam nodded. "Understanding is stronger than domination." The beast lowered her head and pressed her snout gently against his back, a gesture that drew gasps from every onlooker. He turned and placed his hand against her jaw, feeling the warm rumble of her purr travel through his arm. In that moment, the instructors understood the truth. He had not tamed her. He had earned her friendship. The Academy documented the event as a historic breakthrough in xenobiology and interspecies behavioral studies. Cadets spoke of it for years, recounting how a single human accomplished what entire teams had failed to achieve. Liam's success reshaped training protocols, emphasizing empathy and observation over aggression. The Vorkara beast became a symbol of the Academy's evolution, though she remained untethered by any command except his. She stayed near the outskirts of the Academy grounds, patrolling the perimeter willingly, often appearing beside him when he walked the fields at dusk. Their bond remained strong, built on trust rather than expectation. In time, the instructors would come to understand what Liam realized from the beginning. Some creatures were never meant to be controlled, only respected. And respect when freely given, could create alliances more powerful than force ever could. He often returned to the canyon where their journey began, sometimes with her beside him, sometimes alone. The alcove still stood, unchanged, a testament to the moment two beings from different worlds chose to meet, not as enemies, but as equals. Each time he stood there, he felt the quiet reminder of what she had taught him, that true strength lived not in conquest, but in connection. And so the trial ended not with a victory over a beast, but with a partnership that reshaped the Academy forever, proving that trust could tame even the fiercest legend, and that understanding